Part 1. Small Actions, Invisible Changes. We often believe our lives are shaped by big moments. A big opportunity. A big decision. A big breakthrough. But more often, life is shaped by something much quieter. Something we hardly notice at all. Repetition. Hello, everyone. Before we begin, I'd like you to think about a simple question. What are you repeating every day? Not what you hope to do, not what you plan to do, but what you actually repeat. Because whether we realize it or not, our lives are constantly being shaped by repetition. A thought repeated becomes a belief. A behavior repeated becomes a habit. A habit repeated becomes part of our identity. And over time, that identity begins to shape our future. It's a quiet process. So quiet that most people don't notice it happening. But that doesn't make it any less powerful. Imagine a river flowing through a landscape. On the first day, nothing seems to change. On the second day, nothing seems different. Even after a month, the rocks appear untouched. But year after year, the river continues to flow. And eventually, it carves valleys through stone. Not because it was powerful once, because it was consistent. Life often works the same way. Now think about learning a language. One day of study doesn't change much. One conversation doesn't create fluency. One lesson doesn't transform your ability. But something interesting happens when those small efforts are repeated. A few words become a few hundred. A few hundred become thousands. Conversations become easier. Confidence grows. And one day, you find yourself doing something that once felt impossible. The transformation feels sudden, but it wasn't. It was built quietly through repetition. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Maybe you've learned a skill, played an instrument, improved your fitness, or developed a new habit. At the beginning, the progress felt invisible. Sometimes it even felt frustrating. You put in effort and saw almost nothing in return. Many people stop during that stage, not because they are incapable, because the results arrive more slowly than expected. And that's understandable. We live in a world that loves immediate results, immediate answers, immediate rewards, immediate success. But many of the most meaningful things in life grow slowly, like trees, like trust, like wisdom, like character. Now imagine two seeds planted on the same day. Both receive sunlight. Both receive water. Both begin their journey underground. For weeks, very little seems to happen. If someone looked at the soil, they might think nothing is growing. But beneath the surface, something important is taking place. Roots are forming. Foundations are developing. Preparation is happening. The growth is real, even if it cannot yet be seen. Many parts of life work exactly like this. Sometimes your growth is happening beneath the surface. Sometimes progress is invisible before it becomes obvious. And that can require patience. Now let's think about another example. Imagine two friends. Both decide to read before bed. The first friend reads 10 pages every night. The second friend says they will start later. A week passes. The difference is small. A month passes. Still small. But years later, the difference is enormous. One person has spent hundreds of hours learning, exploring ideas, expanding their perspective. The other is still waiting for the perfect time to begin. The interesting part is this: the difference wasn't created in a single day. It was created through repetition. Now here's something worth reflecting on. Many people focus on goals, and goals are important. But goals only influence your direction. Your habits influence your days, and your days eventually become your life. Think about that. If someone wants to become healthier, the goal matters. But what truly changes their future is what they repeat. The walks, the meals, the choices, the routines. If someone wants to become more confident, the goal matters. But confidence is often built through repeated experiences, repeated effort, repeated courage, repeated practice. The future is often hidden inside today's repetitions. Now imagine two musicians. Both dream of performing beautifully. One waits for inspiration. The other practices for a short time every day. Neither sees dramatic progress in a week, but after a year, their paths begin to separate. Not because one person was more talented, because one person repeated the process. This idea extends far beyond skills. It applies to relationships too. Trust is built through repetition. Kindness repeated creates connection. Listening repeated creates understanding. Small moments repeated create strong relationships. Many people look at close friendships and wonder how they became so strong. The answer is often simple: time, consistency, repetition. The same principle applies to families, to careers, to health, to personal growth, to almost every meaningful area of life. Now let's go a little deeper. Sometimes repetition works for us, and sometimes it works against us. That's what makes it so important. Just as positive habits shape our future, negative habits do the same. A small act of procrastination seems harmless. One day doesn't matter much. But repeated over months and years, it creates a pattern. A pattern becomes a habit. A habit becomes a lifestyle. And eventually, that lifestyle produces results. The same is true for negative thinking. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One repeatedly tells themselves, "I'll find a way." The other repeatedly tells themselves, "I can't do this." At first, the difference seems small. Just a few words, just a few thoughts. But repeated thoughts often become beliefs. And beliefs influence actions. Actions influence outcomes. This is why repetition is so powerful. It doesn't just shape what we do, it shapes who we become. Perhaps that's why small actions deserve more respect than they usually receive. Most people underestimate today's actions because today's actions seem insignificant. But life is rarely changed by one action. It is changed by what we repeat. Imagine walking through a field. One step leaves almost no trace, but thousands of steps create a path. Eventually, the path becomes so clear that anyone can see it. Our habits work the same way. Every repetition is another step, another footprint, another vote for the person we are becoming. Now think about your own life. What are you repeating every day? What thoughts are you strengthening? What habits are you reinforcing? What kind of person are those repetitions creating? These questions matter more than they may seem, because the future often arrives quietly, not through dramatic moments, but through small actions repeated over time. Now let's step back for a moment. This message is not about perfection. No one repeats the right habits every day. No one gets everything right. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Because once we become aware of what we're repeating, we gain the ability to change it. In the next part, we'll explore why repetition is more powerful than motivation, why small habits often defeat big intentions, and why the people who change their lives usually begin with surprisingly small actions. Because in the end, we rarely become what we wish for. We become what we repeat. Part 2. Why repetition is more powerful than motivation. Motivation feels powerful. It inspires us. It energizes us. It makes us believe change is possible. But motivation comes and goes. Repetition stays. And over time, repetition changes our lives far more than motivation ever can. Take a moment and think about something you've wanted to improve. Perhaps your health, your confidence, your relationships, your English, your finances, or maybe simply the way you spend your days. Now think about how change usually begins. Often it starts with motivation. A new year, a new goal, a new book, a new idea. Suddenly we feel inspired. We feel ready. We tell ourselves that this time will be different. And for a few days, it often is. We exercise. We study. We wake up earlier. We work harder. Everything feels possible. But then something happens. Life returns to normal. The excitement fades. Energy drops. The feeling disappears. And many people stop. Not because they don't care. Not because they're lazy. Because motivation was never designed to last forever. It's a visitor, not a permanent resident. Now imagine two people. The first person only acts when they feel motivated. The second person acts whether they feel motivated or not. At first, the difference is invisible. Some days they both make progress. Some days they both struggle. But over time, their paths begin to separate. One person is guided by feelings. The other is guided by repetition. Years later, the gap becomes enormous. Not because one person had more passion, because one person learned how to continue after the passion faded. This is one of the most important lessons in personal growth. The life you want is often built on ordinary days, not extraordinary ones. Think about a farmer. A farmer cannot depend on motivation alone. Some mornings are cold. Some are rainy. Some are difficult. Yet the work continues. The seeds are planted. The fields are maintained. The crops are cared for. Not because every day feels exciting, because repetition creates results. Now imagine if the farmer only worked when inspired. What would happen to the harvest? The answer is obvious. Nature rewards consistency, and life often does too. Now let's go a little deeper. One reason repetition is so powerful is because it reduces resistance. Think about brushing your teeth. Most people don't wake up each morning and debate whether they should do it. They simply do it. Why? Because repetition has turned the action into something automatic. A decision that once required effort now requires very little thought. This is how habits work. They make important actions easier to repeat. And over time, those repetitions begin shaping our lives. Imagine two students. One studies only when they feel inspired. The other studies for 20 minutes every evening. The second student may not always enjoy it. Some days they may feel tired. Some days distracted. Some days unmotivated. But the habit continues. A year later, the results speak for themselves. Not because 20 minutes is extraordinary, because repetition is. Now, here's something interesting. People often overestimate what they can accomplish in a week, but underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. Why? Because we naturally focus on dramatic change. We want transformation. We want breakthroughs. We want immediate results. But life often changes quietly. A page read every day becomes dozens of books. A short walk every day becomes better health. A kind word every day strengthens a relationship. A small improvement repeated hundreds of times becomes mastery. The individual action seems insignificant. The repetition changes everything. Imagine a stone staircase. Each step is small. Each step seems ordinary. But taken together, they can lead you to an entirely different place. Habits work in much the same way. Every repetition is a step, and every step carries you somewhere. The question is simply this: where are your repetitions leading? Now let's think about relationships. Many people believe strong relationships are built through grand gestures, and sometimes those moments matter. But more often, relationships grow through small, repeated actions. A conversation, a message, a moment of listening, a simple act of kindness, repeated again and again. Trust is rarely built in a day. It is built through consistency. The same is true for respect. The same is true for friendship. The same is true for love. What we repeat shapes our relationships just as surely as it shapes our habits. Now imagine two gardens. In the first garden, weeds are removed regularly. In the second, they are ignored. For a while, the difference may seem small, but eventually, the results become impossible to ignore. Our minds work the same way. The thoughts we repeat grow stronger. The beliefs we repeat become familiar. The attitudes we repeat become part of our character. If we repeatedly focus on gratitude, gratitude grows. If we repeatedly focus on resentment, resentment grows. The mind, like a garden, responds to what is cultivated. Now here's something deeper. Many people wait for a major life change before they change their habits. But often the opposite is true. Small habits create major life changes. Imagine a plane leaving an airport. If its direction changes by only a few degrees, the difference seems insignificant at first. But over a long journey, that small adjustment can lead to an entirely different destination. Life often works the same way. Small repeated actions may feel insignificant today, but given enough time, they can completely change where we end up. Now think about your own life. What are you practicing every day? Not occasionally, not when you feel inspired, but consistently. What habits are becoming part of your identity? What future are those habits creating? These questions matter because every repetition is shaping something, whether we notice it or not. Now let's step back for a moment. This message is not about making huge changes overnight. In fact, huge changes often fail. The goal is something much smaller and much more powerful. To become just a little better at something important. Then repeat it again and again and again. In the final part, we'll explore how repetition shapes identity itself, why small habits can completely transform the way we see ourselves, and why the person you become tomorrow is hidden inside the actions you repeat today. Because in the end, motivation may start the journey, but repetition is what carries it forward. Part 3. The person you become. Every action is a vote. A vote for the person you are becoming. A vote for the habits you strengthen. A vote for the future you create. And over time, those votes begin to tell a story. Take a moment and imagine meeting yourself 5 years from now. Not the version of yourself you hope to become. Not the version you dream about. The version created by your current habits. The version created by your daily choices. The version created by what you repeat. What would that person look like? How would they think? How would they spend their days? What kind of life would they be living? These questions are worth considering, because the future often arrives more quietly than we expect. Now let's continue. Many people believe their identity is fixed. They think confidence is something you either have or don't have. They think discipline is something some people are born with. They think successful people are simply different. But life often tells a different story. Identity is not built in a single moment. It is built through repetition. Imagine a person who decides to walk every evening. At first, they don't see themselves as an active person. They're simply taking a walk. A week passes, then a month, then a year. Eventually, something changes. The behavior becomes familiar. The habit becomes normal. And one day, without realizing it, they begin to think of themselves differently. Not because someone told them who they were, because their actions showed them. This is one of the most powerful things about repetition. It doesn't just change what we do. It changes how we see ourselves. Now imagine two people. Both want to become writers. The first person spends years saying, "One day I'll write a book." The second person writes 1 page every day. At first, neither person has a book. The difference seems small, but months later, one person has hundreds of pages. Years later, one person has become a writer, not because of talent, not because of luck, because of repetition. The identity followed the habit. This pattern appears everywhere. A person becomes healthier by repeating healthy choices. A musician becomes skilled by repeating practice. A gardener grows a beautiful garden by caring for it repeatedly. A friendship becomes stronger through repeated moments of attention and care. The things we repeat shape the things we become. Now here's something deeper. Many people focus on changing their results, but lasting change often begins by changing their repetitions. Think about a tree. If the roots change, the tree changes. If the roots remain the same, the tree remains the same. Our daily habits are like roots, hidden beneath the surface. Easy to overlook, yet they support everything above them. When we change the roots, the results eventually follow. Not immediately, but inevitably. Now imagine a sculptor working on a block of stone. One strike of the hammer seems insignificant. The stone barely changes, The second strike seems just as small. The third, the fourth, the 100th, the 1,000th. Eventually, a sculpture appears. People admire the finished work, but the sculpture was created by countless small actions. Not one dramatic moment. Life often works the same way. We become what we repeatedly do. Now let's go a little deeper. One reason people become discouraged is because they focus too much on outcomes. They ask, why haven't I changed yet? Why aren't the results visible? Why does progress feel so slow? Those feelings are understandable. Most people experience them. But meaningful growth often spends a long time invisible. Imagine watching the sunrise. The sky doesn't suddenly become bright. The darkness slowly gives way to light. Minute by minute, almost unnoticed. Until suddenly the world looks different. Growth often follows the same pattern. It feels slow while it's happening, but remarkable when we look back. Now think about a child learning to walk. The first attempts are clumsy, uncertain, unsteady. The child falls again and again, but something important happens. They keep trying. Not because they are motivated every day, not because they have a perfect plan, because repetition teaches them what success feels like. Eventually, walking becomes natural. Something that once seemed impossible becomes ordinary. The same thing happens throughout life. Skills become habits. Habits become identity. Identity becomes destiny. Now imagine two paths through a forest. One path is walked every day. The other is rarely used. Over time, the first path becomes clear and easy to follow. The second begins to disappear. Our habits work the same way. The thoughts we repeat become easier to think. The actions we repeat become easier to perform. The beliefs we repeat become easier to believe. Repetition creates pathways, and those pathways influence the direction of our lives. That's why small choices matter more than they appear. Not because they change everything today, because they influence what becomes easier tomorrow. Now here's something worth remembering. You don't have to transform your entire life this week. You don't have to become a completely different person overnight. Most meaningful change doesn't happen that way. Instead, it begins with something much smaller. A single action worth repeating. A single habit worth protecting. A single choice worth making again tomorrow. And then the next day, and the day after that. Until one day, you look back and realize something extraordinary. The life you wanted wasn't built in a moment. It was built through repetition. Now think about your own life. What habits are shaping your future? What thoughts are becoming stronger? What actions are quietly becoming part of your identity? And perhaps the most important question of all, what kind of person are you becoming through what you repeat? Now let's step back for a moment. This message is not about perfection. It's not about never making mistakes. It's not about getting everything right. It's about understanding a simple truth. Every day, whether we realize it or not, we are practicing becoming someone. The question is who? Now here's the final thought. A river shapes stone through repetition. A tree grows through repetition. A path appears through repetition. And a life is built the same way, not through one extraordinary day, but through ordinary days repeated with intention. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one simple idea. If you want to know where your future is heading, look at what you repeat. Because in the end, we rarely become what we wish for. We become what we repeatedly choose. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep choosing the habits that lead you toward the person you want to become. And see you in the next story.